Hi, welcome to Slideshow. My name is Dave Hayward. I'm the founder of Europa Creative Partners. I am super excited about this week's guest. I know I say that every time we have one of these podcasts, but believe me, this is a cracker of an episode. We have Ed Ortega, fan favourite, friend of the firm. He's back. We're talking about AI transformation, specifically about its influence on the future of work. Big topic right now. And then we have an incredible demo towards the end, about halfway through the recording. I am just inserting myself into proceedings, obviously recording this after the recording, to say like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. We really appreciate your support.
Hi, Dave. Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Ortega. I'm a partner at Machine and Folk, which is a AI strategy and development firm, consultancy. We are based all over the world.
You're literally globe-trotting. And of course, today you're beaming in from, the west coast of America. This little podcast is in Auckland, New Zealand, of course, capital of the world. And today we're going to talk about AI transformation, specifically how AI is transforming work. And obviously you're seeing some stuff happening you're in the field and you're seeing stuff happening at pace. I guess probably a question you get asked quite a bit is, what's going to happen to my job? What is AI doing to my job?
Yeah, I mean, everyone from my mother-in-law to people that I meet at my daughter's soccer games. As soon as I tell them I'm working in AI, they ask me, oh, is AI going to steal my job? It's like the number one question that people ask. I think it's driven by media hype and pundits on TV and stuff like that. But the truth is stranger. I think it's hard for us to imagine what the future is like. And so we look for obvious or easy things. And that's a really easy thing to get your head around, like an AI robot, coming and somehow stealing your job. But that's not the way things are working. In fact, what's happening is our jobs are getting transformed in interesting ways. The job is changing. The role is changing. What we need to do to be valuable is changing. And that's because of AI. AI is transforming how we work, not necessarily replacing us as if we are cogs in some machine.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I saw, of course, you do a bit of work for Section, and I saw Section CEO about, a long time ago now. It feels like a long time ago. He gave a workshop down here in Auckland, and at that point, I obviously heard of ChatGPT, but I barely used it. And I sat in that workshop and I thought, oh my God, this technology is coming in like a freight train. If I don't get my arms around this as a marketer, I am totally cooked. This is it. Now, that was probably an overreaction to something that's quite new. It has served me quite well, but I would say that I think that when you're in this big change that's happening, it's very hard to figure out how to pass this intellectually rather than emotionally. And I actually heard a great Laura, for CEO of Descript, was on LinkedIn, and she had this great video about what she calls a sandwich bet, and that's how she counters the fear, which is that she says, tell me a specific prediction that you have, and I'll bet you a sandwich on it. And it's kind of like, okay, so you were afraid that AI is going to take your job. What's your sandwich bet on this?
Well, a year and a half ago when I was teaching classes for Section, I think I was in Auckland and doing a workshop there. I was telling people, hey, if you're an early, I know the hype was still happening back then. It was already happening. Everyone was worried, right? And I was telling them, hey, you're an early adopter. Like the fact that you're even using this and getting a feel for this technology is really going to serve you. Even if you don't implement it in any significant way, you still understand what it can do and what it can't do. And that's the problem that people have, is they don't quite understand what it can't do. Because there's all these demos where people show off, oh, look, AI is like solving all these big problems. And there's all these pundits who go out and talk about crazy stuff about the amazing capabilities of AI. But I still sit down at my computer every day and have a hard time making AI do relatively simple things, because it's not a human being. It doesn't have all the context we have. It's not smart in the way that we're smart, right? It has a lot of knowledge, and it's able to parse our language in a way that has never been possible before by computers. And so it feels smart, but it's not really thinking. And I think that's a hard thing to understand until you use the tool a lot. And so like I'm amazed every single day. Like just today I was using a new tool that I've been playing with, and I was absolutely floored at what it was able to do. So
Well,
it's
it's still
amazing.
it is amazing, but it has yet to take my rubbish out, which
Or do your job,
yeah,
right? It's not
no,
doing your job, right?
no,
That my bet would be that things aren't going to change that much as far as employment and stuff, because
yeah.
one reason is just a business reason. A rising tide raises all ships. And so what's happening right now is we're getting this technology and we're all learning and figuring out how to deploy it and create value with it. So last year or a year and a half ago, a lot of work was done, but no value was created. And you heard the pushback from business and this whole thing about the AI bubble and all this stuff. Everyone was excited, but they weren't seeing the monetary results that they were expecting, right? I think now we're all starting to understand, okay, where some important value is coming from these tools. And it's not like people are stopping, they're not hiring people, even in development firms where there's a lot of engineers, because people were like, oh, engineers are going to be the first to go because they're being replaced because AI can write all this code. It turns out an engineer's most valuable contribution is not writing code, it's thinking. And the AI doesn't do a very good job at thinking, like how to architect an app, how to do something novel. It does a lot of boilerplate stuff that is a pain in the butt. So the CEO, the first thing they think is, oh, cool, I don't need as many engineers. I'm going to fire all these engineers, right? That's really short-term thinking. The smart CEOs are saying, oh, I've always wished that I had 2 or 3 times as many engineers, but I never could afford them. Now you do. Now you do have 3 times as many engineers because they're all supported by this AI platform that can help them move very efficiently. So now that business, the CEO, man or woman who says, I'm going to embrace this and I'm going to run with it, they're going to outpace their competitors who are sitting around firing their engineers thinking, oh, I can maintain the status quo speed. No, no. The status
No,
quo
you're right.
speed now is ramping up really fast. And the people who are embracing AI are the ones who are moving faster. But it's painful because you have to learn. You have to learn, and it necessarily changes the way you work, which is the kind of the topic of what we're talking about today. And that's hard. People don't like to change. People don't want to, they're good at what they do. They don't want to start messing with things. And when they start using AI, they actually start slowing down and their output gets worse because they need to learn how to use the new tool. But once they get a handle on it, it's like rocket ship, they take off.
I think also I've recently divorced from ChatGPT. I've gone all in with Claude. I think a lot
Okay.
of people are doing that right now. And one of the reasons that I was a little bit reluctant to leave ChatGPT, and it's only financial, I actually think it's a great platform, was that I've invested so much time and effort into it, and tuning it and all that kind of stuff. Then I realized that this kind of relationship that I had with it, in terms of which is a lot around routine and all that kind of stuff, is is probably only a year old or 6 months old or 18 months old, whatever the time frame is. And that's often what happens with people at work. They get into these kind of routines. They like their job as they define it. But it doesn't take long before, when you've got a better alternative, before you suddenly realize, oh, that's actually just some sort of mental framing that I've got. I've just got to let go of that. The reassurance of the routine is actually completely different to the benefits of embracing this kind of radical change. But it does talk to what we were talking about before the podcast, around that idea that in the old days, you'd get all of the analog processes. And we used to do it with rooms where you'd have like paper all over the wall, papering out all of the paper processes, the analog process. And then you transform it more or less exactly in the same way, but just digitally. And this whole process is actually cut it. You don't need to do that because it's actually an entirely different workflow. It doesn't resemble what became before, either digitally or analog in many ways.
Yeah, 100%. I find that, we do a lot of experimentation at our company to figure out how we can move faster, to try new things. And if you sort of take 10 or 15% of your day to dedicate, or, your week to dedicate to those kinds of efforts, it slows you down,
Yeah.
right? You're fumbling, you're heading dead ends. We're trying tools that don't work. We're collaborating around processes that fail. But over time, the learning starts to aggregate.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that our team moves so much faster than it used to. And this gets highlighted for me when we interact with other companies and we come on board and we say, okay, we're going to work alongside you. It's like, I feel like we're Olympic sprinters and they are like one-legged,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's like so slow, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, right, because this is the old way, and we don't notice it because we're getting used to the pace at which we work. But they have a really hard time keeping up. Like they can't stay with us, and so we have to sort of slow down and like onboard them to our style. And I'm not saying this in like a bragging way. It's
Yeah.
just a highlighting like how much has changed in such a short amount of time. And a lot of that change is around workflow and process, but also you get acclimated to that pace.
I'm going to use an art analogy here, and I'm not sure if it's going to hang up at work. So let's give it a whirl. There's Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about. Did he write a book? No, it was on a podcast actually. He talked about it, and he talked about two types of creative people essentially. And this is again, this is a Malcolm Gladwell theory. Can't emphasize that enough because do with that what you will. But essentially, there is two types in his kind of concept. One is the conceptual artist who often get famous young, and they think of artworks fully formed. So in actual fact, the art of making it is really just about fulfilling that vision. And to give you an idea, that would be someone like Picasso or someone like that. They actually kind of know what they're going to paint. And so the act of painting is actually just painting it. And then you get the experimental style of painter, and that would be, or creative, that would be someone like Cezanne, and they don't know what they're going to produce. They actually create the work through an iterative and highly experimental, very frustrating at times process. But that's how work gets made. It's in this kind of, you probably put some like the abstract expressionists and people like that in that camp as well. And I feel like this is a very long bow to draw possibly, but that is what's happened. Digital transformation as it was is that whole idea like what the structure is and how it's going to look when you build it. Whereas AI transformation is more around this experimental phase. You're going to get a really great result eventually, but you don't know how you're going to get there. And that is part of the joy, the chaos, and the messiness with how you embark on this process.
I totally relate to that. As a matter of fact, one of the interesting things about the way we work is we have embraced like an agile, lean
Yeah.
approach. And that is exactly as you're describing. We don't promise what we're going to deliver in 12 months. We promise what we're going to deliver in 1 month or in the next week. We have these really tight time frames, and we're really focused on the problem. So we say, okay, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? Like, what's the opportunity that we could potentially deliver on? And what's getting in the way of us delivering that opportunity? Because you have a chance in the world right now to sort of re-examine all the problems that you attack in business and start to re-attack them, right? Because we've sort of solved them as best we could with the old paradigm, but now we have this new technology that gives us a new paradigm to reinvestigate what's the potential solutions are. And so because it's all new, you don't have a playbook, you don't know how to attack this so that you can end up with some result, because that result is just, it's unknowable at this moment. What happens is then we iterate forward and we attack small problems, or we attack certain things that are getting in the way. And as we solve those problems, it starts to feed back to the beginning where we go, oh, I see that since we can solve this thing, now we can look at that other problem and that affects that. And maybe there's a new way to do that. And that's how the project grows to become something more significant. So I'll give you a concrete example because that was like very abstract, right? We did a project last year and maybe I talked about this on your last podcast, but did a project where essentially we're gathering data from public documents. That data is not structured. So the old way of doing it was to have people read the documents and copy and paste the data into a database, right? it's a very tedious process. It takes 6 hours per document. Needs all these checks and stuff. It's really painful. So when we first looked at that, we said, well, maybe we can automate that step. And we did. And the problem was accuracy, and we worked on the accuracy problem. And eventually we got it so that we could recreate the data plucking. But once we did that, through that process, we learned, wait a second, why are we putting it in this database, in this structure? Because the database is actually not a very good way to contain all the information that's in these documents. It's like we're pulling out 1% of the information and sticking it in the database. And the only reason we're doing that is because that's all we could do with the human power that we had. Otherwise, we'd have to build like really complicated databases, and people would take 12 hours to get the data out, right? So the holdup was the human in that process. So when we started asking people, like, why are you pulling the data out of the database, right?
Yeah.
That's when we had our aha moment. And they're like, well, we want to analyze all these different things. And then we realized, because we now have this capability to ingest that data and store it in all these different ways, we can make all your dreams come true. Like the bottleneck was the human, and you picked this weird process because that was all you could do. But now that we have AI, we can completely transform how that information is stored so that we can deliver like more value to the people who actually want that information, right? So, but it took us a couple steps to get there. Like it was hard to tell at the beginning that was the answer they were looking for. So that's that painting thing you're talking about. Like we had to paint some colors that weren't going to work first.
Yes.
But that showed us the colors that would work. And then once we got that, we discovered where the beauty was going to be. It was not obvious from the beginning how that thing was going to turn out.
And to our earlier point about worried about job displacement, right? Those jobs sound awful. The ones that were like, in a way, what we're doing is we're liberating people from stuff that humans shouldn't be doing anyway. I mean, I can't imagine growing up if you're a kid that you really want to be. I really want to be someone that cut and paste out of one doc as some unstructured data and put it in a data lake. I think that's not what kids want to be, astronauts or something like that. Again, not to disparage the people that did that, because that was the role at the time, but what you're actually offering them is a better alternative, essentially.
And the people that did that job, when we first started talking to them, they were worried. They were like, oh, these guys are coming in, and
Right.
We were literally trying to replace them.
Right.
That was exactly what we were trying to do, right?
Right.
However, it was clear almost from the beginning that those people, when we first talked to them, we're like, okay, so show us how you do this job. And they started showing us, and everyone on my team was like, oh my God, this is so gnarly. Like, do your eyes bleed at the end of the day from this kind of minute? And they were like, yeah, it's like, it sucks. And it turns out that all those people, they were in India. They had degrees. They knew these documents inside and out. They were not dummies. They were not like low talented people. They were highly talented, trained, educated, spoke English really well, understood all this financial, like lingo. So it was clear right from the beginning. We're like, these people should not be doing this job. They should be doing the next job up, which is the analysis job, where they're doing more difficult analysis, aggregate analysis of the documents. They understand what's in those documents. And so there was a backlog because you couldn't have those people doing that job. There wasn't enough time. And so they spent all their time doing the plucking, and then they spent maybe 15% of their time doing these analysis, these custom kind of query jobs, right? Now we're able to say like, hey, for the company, you have savings because these folks don't get paid that much, and they can now spend 90% of their time doing the custom queries and a little bit of time validating what the AI is doing. And then that sort of then frees up the US analysts to do higher level work. And that's changing how that business model that they have is changing, because they have to start thinking, now that we can do everything twice as fast, like how do we charge for this? And so that brought open a lot of questions around the business model powered by AI.
It's huge stuff. Hopefully they didn't go with, let's pretend it still takes the same amount of time and just have a cup of tea for 2 weeks.
But if they did, that won't last long. That game's not going to last long.
Nah, that's the thing. And we live in a capitalist system, and competition is the thing. Presumably they have competition, and you kind of if you find an angle and advantage like that, it's only a matter of time before they figure it out. So you've got to use that time wisely and brutally effectively. So What an interesting story. So we've been talking also about this, a new tool, or I guess a new process that you're very enthusiastic about, because it's been allowing you in recent workshops and to kind of progress things a lot faster with non-technical business folk. So should we maybe have a talk about that and maybe think about how we can maybe demo it today? I think it's called
Yeah.
Pencil.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two aspects of this. Let me frame this a little bit.
Yeah.
So that we do strategy and we do development, AI strategy and development. So the strategy piece is how can a company utilize this new technology in a way that actually delivers value and isn't just like a toy, right? And there's a lot of pressure on companies right now to take advantage of the tech because of all the hype. But there's also this back pressure around the fact that nobody knows exactly, there isn't a playbook for how to turn the tech into value. So there are a few use cases, like customer service chatbots, and there's a few things that have emerged as like really obvious use cases. But typically what we find is that every company has its own special, value creation opportunity or set of value creation opportunities, and it's not cookie cutter. And this is one of the reasons why SaaS is kind of like shaking in its boots right now, because SaaS is the opposite. SaaS is like generic solution to generic business problem. And the only way it works is to sell it to a lot of people at a high price. And what AI is allowing people to do is build specific problems to solutions to specific problems. And so this is threatening SaaS. So for our team, the strategy side, one of the things we do is we run these workshops, and we've been experimenting with how can we run this workshop faster and faster, because nobody has time anymore. And to get people together, a design sprint originally was conceived as a week-long effort. Good luck trying to get a team for a week, right? That's impossible. So we shortened it to 2 days with a day in between, where we would do one day was coming up with kind of the opportunity identification and alignment of the team around what they might want to build. And then we'd go away for a day and we would make some prototypes and then come back and we'd pressure test the prototypes, to have everyone aligned around like where the value was, what was working, what wasn't working. And this is a really great way to quickly go from nothing to something and have a tangible thing that you can then show off, right? That's one side. Now on the development side, we have designers and developers and product managers working together. And one of the first things we started to realize was that product managers can do a lot of heavy lifting in helping to define what the product should be. So with vibe coding tools, our PMs, they build the prototype and then they go to the client and they say, hey, is this about what you were thinking? What could be changed? And a lot of work can be done before the developer even enters the picture, because the developer should be working on like hard problems, right? At some point, we're going to hit a point where we run into something that you just can't vibe code your way through. And we need a really smart developer to think like, what should be the architecture for this system? The next piece is the designer. The product manager can only get so far. They're not a designer. They're usually building these kind of janky prototypes that they're as good as the tool can deliver, but you're typically not on brand. And there's all these problems, right? And the value of a designer is to really understand the user experience and to build some like novel approaches to, how a workflow might work. So a designer is not just painting, it's not lipstick on a pig. A good designer, at least a product designer, is really thinking through the experience and like, what could make this awesome for the user? What could take away all the pain, remove friction and stuff like that. So to have them in Figma, pushing pixels, getting the round, the corners on the buttons. I mean, it's just like, it's a bit like a waste of time, right? You want them really thinking through the hard problems, not spending 70% of their time getting things aligned and stuff in Figma. And then there's a problem with moving from design to development, because the designer is essentially drawing the interface in Figma. And Figma is literally a vector art program. It's been enhanced with all the stuff that it can generate code, but it generates garbage code. So typically what the designer is doing is sending a picture to a developer, and then the developer needs to interpret the picture and write that code to get it out. And all the tools that try to circumvent this process have failed. Like we've tried them all, they've all failed. And we found that the best way to do it is basically take the picture, give it to Claude Code, and Claude Code will build it out.
Yeah.
But then inevitably it doesn't get it all right, and designers are really picky. And so then the designer comes back in, looks at the finished code, and says, oh, this corner should have been 8 pixel round and it's 4, so we need to fix that. And then they go and mark up in this very tedious, should never have happened kind of process. That is mimicking the old process. In the old process, the designer, the product manager did some definition and said, here are the requirements. The designer then mocked up what that could be, maybe did a prototype and worked with the client to define it, and then got it all spiffy and made all these notes in their design around what the interaction should be like and how big the corner should be, and then handed that off to the developer, and then the developer rebuilt out the whole thing, and then the designer came back in and looked at it. So that's the old process.
Yep.
It takes forever. Like a lot of highly skilled people doing specific jobs to make sure that it's all working out. You have a ticketing system like Jira in there to make sure that everyone's got their job and there's communication. It's just like a lot. But when we started to see the product managers building and coding and actually building working apps, we were like, how does the designer fit into this? How do we access the high value of the designer in a way that makes them super efficient and integrated into this process? So we've been looking for tools that can make that happen. And essentially what we want is, we want the designer writing code. We want the designer delivering code, but designers don't know how to code, but the AI does. So what's the right solution here? And generally we've tried all kinds of things and none of it's really, really worked out because there's always friction somewhere along the line. Until now, we found suddenly this tool called Pencil. And it looks like Figma. It's got a Figma interface, but when you draw a box on the screen, what you're really drawing is code. Like that is converted to HTML code and CSS in the background.
Wow.
And so when the developer does all of his or her drawing, he thinks he's drawing. He thinks he's in Figma, or she thinks that she's in Figma. But what's really going on is underneath the covers, it is writing code. So that code can go into a GitHub repo. They can do versioning. It's all the benefits of code with all the benefits of a drawing program like Figma. On top of that, it can hook into Claude. So you can start your design, or you can ask Claude to generate the first design. You can give it some hinting or whatever, and it'll do it. You can drop in a photo, a picture of what you want, or inspiration, like here's some ideas, and it can look at all those pictures and go, okay, I think I got it. It can create the design system, things like that. The designer can start working with Claude Code or Claude in the background around this tool, right? Build out a bunch of screens to a certain point where they're really happy. So they're in design mode and they're building out all these screens and they say, okay, this is great. And they can send that file to a developer and say, the developer can then look at the file and say to Claude Code, okay, here are the designs, build out that design. And since the AI knows Node and React and JavaScript and all the tools, it is able to interpret those designs because they're already in code with really high fidelity. So now we've got everybody using a shared language, which is code. And code is very precise. And code is versioned, right? So if someone makes a change, they can go back, or they can go forward, or they can integrate that change. So now we've got everybody working like developers as far as workflow goes, but they're bringing their highest value to the table. It's not perfect. There's still like little friction points, and we're still early on in this journey. But that alone is massively changing our workflow. Like when we have meetings now, it's not someone's waiting for someone to approve something. Everyone's all contributing to this code base, right? Everyone's all working on the code base. Whereas before you'd have like artifacts, Jira artifacts, design artifacts, code artifacts, documents describing requirements, like all that stuff. None of that is happening anymore. We're just all centered around essentially GitHub, which is our code repository. And we're all contributing to that. And so people can be working on totally different things that the designer can say, hey, I've got an idea for this new interface, check it out. And then you just pull up your browser and he's built it.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so then the developer can go in and go, oh, okay, I see how I can wire this into our backend. The design system is contributing to it. It's just bonkers. It's a totally different workflow. If I brought a designer in from the outside world and said, you're going to be a designer, they would not know how to work. They would not know how to contribute to the team. That's how much it's changed.
Reminds me a bit of Toyota in I think it was 80s, maybe 90s. They had to build a factory in the US, and because of some laws that have been passed about, having a certain amount of local manufacturing. And so they went to General Motors, and General Motors gave them the worst possible factory, the one that was ridden with problems, every kind of problem. And how they used to work is they'd have the production line would make its way through, the car would make its way through, and the idea was that the production line never stops. So what would happen is if you made a mistake on the way through your station, that floor would stay there, and then basically what would happen is they'd end up with all of these cars with problems in like a kind of a holding pattern. And then there would be people that would go in and fix the problems, sometimes significant problems. There's like a bolt that was actually done very early in the process wrong and all this kind of stuff. And so what the Japanese did was they took all of these auto workers and they took them to Japan to see how their plant works, which was the early iterations of the Kaizen theory.
Yeah.
And how they worked was basically when the production, if you made a mistake or you had something that you couldn't rectify, the production line very much did stop. And what would happen is you press a button and it would stop for 5 minutes to play pleasant music. And then people near you would come and help you actually try and fix it. And then if after a certain amount of time you couldn't fix it, some more pleasant music would come and more people would come and help you fix it. And so what you ended up with is actually a more efficient process, but it's one that didn't really resemble the process that these guys had come from. And it seems like that's kind of the sort of is a lot less, in a way, it's a lot less fiddly. You're not sort of having to go back and fix, like you're fixing stuff in real time together rather than individually. That's what.
I mean, that Toyota thing, what's interesting is that the Kaizen and all the Toyota innovation actually inspired Agile and
That's right. Yeah.
And the coding system, right? And continuous improvement, and there's a huge like IT revolution based on that thinking, which goes back to Edward Deming from World War II and stuff, right? Amazing. That's an amazing story, an amazing lineage of like how we do this. And we're still learning from those processes, but you're right. Like we're doing continuous improvement and continuous change, and we're experimenting and trying to get better, and rejecting things that don't work and embracing things that do work, and sometimes trying things again. Maybe over time the situation changes and you're like, maybe, remember that one thing we tried and it didn't work? Like maybe it's time for that. And we'll bring it back and integrate it in or whatever.
Maybe we need Jira again. Yeah, we've got to bring back the tickets. Yeah, God. Oh my God, I was getting hives from agency land, agency time where you're talking about some of those projects where, you're running up against the time and, suddenly you measure your backlog and you realize that you've got twice as much time to do to the time available. So this stuff that you're talking about is pretty amazing. Okay, it's me again from the future, inserting myself back in here just to explain that Ed and I landed on the idea of building our own CRM based on using Pencil. So we got a prompt and we will cut and paste it into Pencil, and then we'll build a CRM while you guys watch and listen. Yeah, let's get into it. What we're doing here is we're talking about the CRM, and we're going to explain to Pencil what we want through Claude, and it looks like it's through Sonnet 4.6 by the looks of things. And we're just going to explain at this point, just explain the general concept, what we want, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I've got like a canvas here. There's a frame, and I'm gonna paste in sort of some that I'm starting with, and we can add this more. So I'm saying I want to build a simple CRM app for my business. It should have the concept of deals and prospects, and deals move through stages. This is all very high level.
Yeah.
The AI knows about these ideas. It knows what a CRM is. And fill in the blanks for all this stuff. I don't need email tracking, but I do want enrichment of my prospects. Who can be added manually or through forms on my website. Yeah. I
Yeah,
want a very
nice.
simple and clean interface, maybe clean monotone, because I don't like a lot of color. Don't worry about
Notice.
authentication for the moment. And let's just see what it comes up with. I mean, that's not a lot to go with. Usually I actually add a lot more about all the things that I care about because I've spent a little bit of time ahead of time thinking through it, or even chatting with ChatGPT or Claude to say, what would this app look like for me and my business? And I would describe my process really well. And then the chat would say, oh, for that, you would probably want this. And it would say, do you want email tracking? That's really hard to do because you have to integrate with Gmail and all this stuff. And no, 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 I don't want any of that stuff. So that's kind of how I arrived at some of these decisions.
So it's
But
sort of
also,
actually a pre-dialogue with a LLM initially to kind of like shape what you actually put in as a prompt, basically.
yeah, I think that saves you a lot of time if you do it that way and you personally think through this app a lot first and then come to the table with a really clear idea of what you want to build. But you can do it the other way too, and I'll show you that here where let's just run it while we're talking. Okay, so I've just sent the command to Pencil. So what's going on is Pencil is not a drawing app like Figma. When you work in
Right.
Figma, you're drawing vectors and you're storing vectors in like a vector format. But in this app, it is storing all this information of the design in code. Okay. And so because of that, you can use a repository, like a code repository, to track your changes and things like that. And it makes it supremely easy to work with developers. So this is the part where like if you're a technical person, you'll find this fascinating. And if you're not a technical person, you won't even understand like what that means, or why that matters. But I'll just say I can create a repository of code. I can drop a pencil file in there and I can say, hey, pencil, do you see where you're at? And it will look around and will go, oh yeah, I'm in a code repo. And I can say, okay, build yourself out. And it'll look at all the files and it'll start building all of the screens and functionality out, including connecting the dots between the screens. So it knows, like if I click this button, I should go to that screen. If I click this should happen.
Wow.
And so you can see it building and what it's doing is over on the left, it's kind of thinking through the design. And what it's not doing, it's not building the app yet. It's just
Right.
designing the app. But I can tell you that a lot of iteration can happen in the design phase. And this is where vibe coding breaks down.
Right.
Because if I started this in V0 or in Lovable,
Yep.
it's really easy in those apps because it starts to build things. It's really easy to go down a dead end or get trapped in a bug that you can't fix. And that's because if you want to make a change, it's called refactoring. You're making changes that might have implications in several different places, and you can start to get tons of bugs in your app so that you can get nowhere, right? A lot of people have experienced this who've tried to vibe code is they've tried to build their app and then suddenly the app's not working and they just get frustrated and they don't know how to get out of it because they don't know how to code and underneath all that vibe coding is
Yeah.
code. But what I can do here is I can just play with the designs and I can imagine in my head how this would work to go from one thing to another. So let me just zoom in here so we can see what it's doing.
Go back to our car analogy earlier. That the sort of problems with vibe coding is essentially all those cars that the bung cars that ended up in the kind of repository at the end because there's problems fundamentally early on because they haven't been resolved. Whereas here you're able to resolve design and user experience issues and things like that before it gets too far down the build phase. Essentially, not too dissimilar in some ways to how a normal designer interacts with I say normal, but in the old process, a designer and developer would interact together. This is just sped up to like a ludicrous speed.
Massively. And I think what's magical about this is but I have some design background, right? And if I set out to design a CRM, I don't have the domain knowledge to really know what decisions to make. The AI does. So this is a good example. This dashboard, it started off and it's like, okay, I didn't even say create a dashboard, but it's like you CRM SAP dashboards. Here's your number of deals. Here's your pipeline value, deals won. I didn't ask for any of this stuff. And
Yeah.
maybe I don't want it. Or maybe I do. Maybe I don't care how many deals I won. So I can actually click in here and I can delete this. And I don't care about that. And it goes away.
Wow.
Or I can, duplicate it and I could say, actually what I want is I want some other thing.
Deals
Like,
lost.
yeah, deals lost. Good job. And, 0 2. So whatever.
Yeah.
Just by making that design change, I've now changed the functionality, the future functionality of the application, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Now, by iterating in design, I'm not breaking the code because there's no code
No
quite
code
yet.
yet. Yeah.
So let's look at some of the other screens that it has created. So here's my deals, and it's created a little Kanban board for me so I can, theoretically move these around the board. That looks pretty nice. And I can manually add my new deal. I can filter deals by whatever, I assume. And then here's my prospects list, which is nice. It's telling me whether it's enriched or whether it's still pending enrichment because that takes time to happen.
Right.
It's come up with funnel base. So
The name. I was just thinking that funnel base is great.
Let's see. And it's got a detail for my user and it shows me what data it enriched, which is really nice, right? It has this concept of forms. I don't know if that's showing up here anywhere.
Won't that be that will be related to the website forms, I imagine, that you mentioned in the prompt maybe.
Yeah, so it's done and it's telling me what it's done. It said, okay, funnel base, it's got a dashboard. We've looked through all this already. Deals, pipeline, Kanban. I didn't ask for that, but that's actually what I wanted. So that's great. It could be that I want a prospect. So this is let me just check really quick here. This only has a deals Kanban board, but maybe I want a deals list, right?
Yeah.
So I'll say I like the deals Kanban board. Let's add the option to see this as a list. You see how it kind of scanned it? It's like looking at it. And what I like that Pencil does is not only can it look at the code that's underlying this, and you can see it's building it out as we watch. Not only can it see the code that's underlying this, it will also go and take pictures of it. So it'll do a screenshot of that frame and it will look at it with vision to make sure that it's what we wanted. So it has a quality assurance loop built into it, which I think is brilliant for a design type thing.
It's incredible.
Now what happens after this is I can say this file is in a folder somewhere. Like when I save this, it's not saved yet, but when I save it, it will go into a folder. Okay, and it'll have a pen called a .pen file. So like a doc file, but it's a pen file that describes everything that's in this. And the application itself has prompts or a model that's tuned to convert pen files into code and vice versa. It can take code and convert to pen files. So if I have an existing repository and I want to start making adjustments to it, I can import that repository of code and it will generate the pen file that describes it. And then the AI can go back and forth between the repository and the design so that I can start iterating on it. So what's amazing is right now, at this moment, what I could do is I could go into the chat box and I could say, this is great. Now start building the interface. And it will build a Next.js. I can actually specify what I want, but I'm going to say Next.js so I can host it on Vercel very easily. Build out the interface for this, start building it. And then it will start building the code and it'll put that code, it'll create it in a form that I can easily deploy it and start playing with it, or I can just run it in a server. Wow. Let's just do that because I think that would be really fun. I'm gonna
that'd be cool. And this is a bit do I understand you right that you could actually you can do kind of reverse migration here, so you could actually have an existing code built product that you've built and then bring it into Pencil and then work on it in Pencil. Is that right? Or have I completely misunderstood? That's mind-blowing. Okay. Here we go.
So I'm going to say, this is great. Let's build the code out, but don't worry about the back end because I don't want to get into databases and stuff like that. I'm not a hardcore developer. I really just want to be able to click around and make sure this thing works the way I want to. Let's just make a clickable prototype that I can user test. Make up data if you, I'm going to say Next.js because I know for a fact that particular platform will, and I'll say Tailwind as a CS. These are technical things, but now I'm using this tool behind the scenes has a coding agent. It's using Claude Code, the same kind of underlying engine as Claude Code. And so that's really awesome because it's not dumb. Like it's thinking through, it's looking at these, and you can see it, like it's like looking at the pages. And it said, let me just tell you what it said, because I love that it said that. It said, let me start by examining the design files to understand what we're working with. And then it said, now let me get screenshots of the other screens. I have a clear picture of all 5 screens. Let me now build the Next.js app. So now it is writing code.
Wow.
And what's cool about this is I can start the first version in Pencil, put it in a repository, and then pull up my IDE, my coding environment, and I can start coding using Claude Code, which is a much more powerful coding editor.
Yeah.
Or if I'm collaborating, the designer can be working like I am right now, building out the prototype or building out particular modules, and then he can or she can submit those to our code repository, and the developer can pick that up and go, okay, cool, you actually did all the work. All I have to do is wire this together.
Right.
The tool, Claude Code, can look at the repository and it can see like how things work in the repository. So it molds to that experience. And so it's not like you're building a one-off app over here and building garbage and then inserting it in. It like knows what the code is. And so it extends what's already there. And that's very, very, very cool and efficient. So you can see like in the old days, my designer might have started like building out all these screens, but it would have taken them a day to do this.
Yep.
And here it's been done in minutes.
No, about 10 minutes flat. Yeah.
And now I'm building out the project. So you can see this is a non-trivial amount of work. So it says it came up with a plan, initialize the Next.js product with Tailwind, build a shared sidebar and layout components, build a dashboard page. So it's got a plan that it's going to work through as we're talking here. If we wait long enough, it will write all that code, and I can pull it up I can run a server and pull it up. I'd say 9 times out of 10 there's an error.
Right.
I have to sort of like deal with the error, but usually it's just like 1 or 2 little bugs that come from this a novo type of creation. But then once it does that, I'm able to then spin it up, and I've got like a working prototype that I can start playing with. Once that prototype is in place, my design files are connected to it. So I can make changes to my design files and say, implement this change in my code base. So they're 2 separate things, which is kind of nice.
Yep.
So I can add a screen or whatever and say, here's a new screen, or hey, I changed the way this layout works, update my code base, and it'll update it. So I, as a designer, potentially can actually code the changes that I want without bothering a developer. And the developer can be working on the database and things like that. When the developer makes changes to implement how the database is connected to those rows, it's done, and the AI can see, oh, I see how this is implemented. So when the designer comes along and makes a change, he doesn't blow up potentially what the developer did.
Right.
And the AI is the intermediary between them, making sure that things are cool. If the developer is like, oh, I need to build a preferences screen, I don't want to bug the designer, it's not a big deal, it doesn't have like high design needs, he can say to the AI, build a preferences panel that looks like the rest of the site, and it will do it because it's got all this context ready for it to do that sort of thing. So you can see how people start collaborating at a much higher level by using tools like this, and the AI becomes the intermediary.
I guess the other thing is, going back to that cognitive load thing, is that you're not doing trivial tasks all the time, which just eat away at your ability to make conceptual decisions. You're working at you're spending time on much higher order things, which you actually have capacity for, because you're not chewing up all that brain power on getting the pixels right in the corner, or those kind of trivial decisions that just eat away at your decision making.
And if I want to, it's the best of both worlds, because if I decide like, hey, I don't like all these square buttons, I can go in here and I can start messing with it and say, what would a round button look like? Do I like that better? That looks cool. And then I can click this button, and I could go to since I've clicked on it, I've highlighted it, and I could say, update all the buttons to match this button, and it'll go through and do all those changes for me.
Damn.
And so those kinds of things where if I am a designer and I am really nitpicky and I do want really precise control over these things, I can also say, create a style system based on this design that can be our base style system that we can use for other components and stuff. So it's just a massive change to how things work.
I think if I were a designer or a developer, watching this type of stuff for the first time would be a kind of out of body experience, wouldn't it? Because it would be challenging as much as exciting. It feels very similar to how I felt about, a few years ago when I came across generative AI as a writer. I was kind of like, whoa, is this the end of what I do? Really, what you're saying, going back to what we talked about, it's the evolution of what you did. It's not because the rising tide lifts all. So if you have a great design team and you start getting rid of your designers and your competition doesn't, they're going to be of higher magnitude order ahead of you, basically.
This is the way we will design.
Yes.
This is the new way we will design. So new designers will come on. They will learn how to design by using these tools. So that's the thing. The whole thing is changing. The whole paradigm is changing.
And that's it. That's the end of this episode of Slideshow. Again, here I am from the future, just beaming in to ask you one more time to like and subscribe to our awesome podcast. Big thank you to Europa Creative Partners for producing this show, and to Ed Ortega, of course, and Machine and Folk